The man only wanted the spaceship, but accidentally bought the alien women inside as well. Jackson had never been good with money, which was why it had taken him 7 years of working double shifts at the moisture farms on Kepler 7 to save enough for a ship. 7 years of recycled air that tasted like rust and protein, paste that allegedly contained nutrients. 7 years of watching ships lift off from the station's departure bays while he calibrated irrigation systems for algae that would become tomorrow's flavorless dinner. The auction house occupied a converted cargo module that smelled of hydraulic fluid and desperation. Jackson clutched his credit chip like it might evaporate, watching the auctioneer, a man whose cybernetic eyes flickered at different rates, giving him a perpetually confused expression, cycle through lots of salvaged equipment and decommissioned vessels. Most of the ships looked like they'd been through a meteor storm without shields. Twice. When the celestial drift appeared on the projection screen, Jackson's heart performed what felt like an unauthorized jump sequence. She wasn't beautiful, not by any stretch. The hull had the kind of scorch marks that suggested previous owners had made questionable decisions about asteroid field shortcuts. But her engines were Talon class, her life support systems showed green across the board, and most importantly, she was rated for deep space. The auctioneer's voice crackled through bad speakers. Lot 47, light cargo vessel, celestial drift, 30 meters, crew capacity 4, some wear and tear as you can see. Starting bid 8,000 credits. Jackson's stomach dropped. He had 12,000 saved. He'd expected to spend every credit. Do I hear 8,000? The auctioneer's mismatched eyes swept the room. A few colonists glanced at the projection and looked away. One man in a merchant captain's jacket started to raise his hand, then apparently thought better of it and scratched his nose instead. 8,000 going once. The auctioneer sounded bored. Jackson's hand shot up before his brain could list all the reasons this seemed suspicious. 8,000 to the gentleman with the optimistic expression. Do I hear 9? Silence. The merchant captain was suddenly very interested in his fingernails. Sold to lot 47 for 8,000 credits. Congratulations on your purchase, sir. Sign here, here, and here. The auctioneer thrust a data pad at Jackson, pages of legal text scrolling faster than any human could read. Jackson signed. He signed everything. His hand was shaking so badly his signature looked like a seismograph reading, but he signed. The auctioneer's smile stretched wider than seemed anatomically possible for a face with that many metal parts. Access codes will be transmitted to your personal device. Pleasure doing business. Next lot, we have a lovely set of plasma torches, only slightly illegal in 6 systems. Jackson barely heard him. He was staring at his account balance, at the 4,000 credits still remaining. Enough for fuel, supplies, maybe even a few repairs. Enough for freedom. The celestial drift waited in docking bay 17, looking somehow worse in person than in the projection. The hull's scorch marks had friends, dents, patches of mismatched plating, and what appeared to be someone's attempt at a custom paint job abandoned halfway through. But the airlock cycled properly, and the interior lights flickered on when Jackson entered his new access code. The bridge was compact, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The pilot's chair had a suspicious stain on the left armrest, but the navigation console lit up with a satisfying hum. Jackson ran his hands over the controls, grinning like an idiot. His ship, after 7 years of saving, of dreaming, of watching others leave while he stayed behind, this was his ship. He spent an hour exploring, checking systems, imagining routes to distant colonies. The galley was barely larger than a closet, but had a functioning protein synthesizer. The crew quarters contained 4 bunks that folded into the walls. The engine room hummed with the steady pulse of a well-maintained fusion core. Then he heard it, a sound from the cargo hold, mechanical and rhythmic, like breathing regulated by technology. Jackson's euphoria crystallized into something colder. The cargo hold. He hadn't checked the cargo hold. The ladder down felt longer than it should. The hold's lights activated automatically, revealing a space larger than he'd expected, mostly empty except for some storage containers, and against the far wall, something that made Jackson's newly purchased ship suddenly feel very complicated. A cryopod. Active. Occupied. Jackson approached the cryopod the way someone might approach a suspicious package left in a public terminal, slowly with the growing certainty that his day was about to get significantly worse. The pod's surface was frosted at the edges, and through the transparent aluminum viewport, he could see her. She looked human mostly, the kind of mostly that made the differences more striking. Her skin had an quality he couldn't quite name, like moonlight on water, and her hair floated in the suspension gel in shades that shifted between silver and pale blue. But it was the ears that marked her as decidedly not from Earth or any of its colonies. They swept back from her head in elegant points, easily twice the length of human ears, with a delicate architecture that seemed almost decorative. A small screen on the pod's side displayed vital signs in steady, healthy rhythms. Jackson touched it, and the interface expanded, showing him far more information than he wanted. Species, Ethari, status, stable suspension, day 1812, scheduled wake cycle, pending manual authorization. "Oh no," Jackson said to the empty cargo hold. No. He pulled out his datapad with shaking hands and opened the purchase documents he'd signed without reading. Page 1. Standard hull warranty, some concerning clauses about ass's condition. Page 2. Engine specifications, fuel capacity, the usual technical details. Page 3. Manifest and included inventory. His eyes found the line item nestled between emergency rations, quantity 40, and medical supplies. Basic. Cargo, 1 Ethari female, skilled navigator, identification number 7733-AE. Condition, suspended. Documentation, included. Jackson made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a whimper. He'd bought a person. He'd accidentally bought a person. This was the kind of mistake that seemed funny in bad holodrama comedies, not in real life where there were probably dozens of laws he was now violating just by standing here. He looked back at the cryopod, at the woman floating peacefully inside, completely unaware that she'd just changed owners like a piece of used furniture. The ethical weight of the situation was crushing, but Jackson's panic was temporarily overridden by a more immediate concern. The pod's status screen was flashing a yellow alert. Suspension fluid at minimum safe levels. Wake cycle recommended within 72 hours. "Of course it is," Jackson muttered. He had 3 days to figure out what to do, which felt simultaneously like too much time and nowhere near enough. He spent the next 20 minutes scrolling through the ship's logs, hoping for context, for explanation, for anything that would make this situation less catastrophic. The previous owner had been someone named Garrett, a trader who'd apparently specialized in what the manifest euphemistically called specialized labor acquisition. The logs were sparse, but Jackson pieced together enough to make his stomach turn. Garrett had won the woman, won her like she was a hand of cards, from a mining consortium operating in the outer reach. When Garrett's debts caught up with him, he'd sold everything in one lot to avoid having assets seized individually. And Jackson, in his excitement over a cheap ship, had become part of the supply chain for what was essentially slavery with better paperwork. He looked at the cryopod again. The woman's face was peaceful, her features relaxed in the suspension sleep. She had no idea what had happened, that she'd been bought and sold, that she was now the property of a moisture farmer who just wanted a ship. Jackson pulled up the pod's manual override. The interface asked him to confirm wake cycle initiation, warning that premature revival could cause disorientation and, in rare cases, aggressive behavior. He hovered his finger over the cancel button. He could just reverse course, take the ship back to the station, demand a refund, claim he hadn't known, hadn't understood what he was buying. But then what? She'd go back into the auction system, get sold to someone else, maybe someone who wouldn't feel sick about the whole arrangement. Jackson pressed confirm. The cryopod hummed louder, its systems shifting from suspension to revival. The gel began to drain, the woman's hair settling around her shoulders as gravity reasserted itself. Her vital signs spiked on the monitor, heartbeat accelerating as her body remembered how to function without chemical assistance. Her eyes opened. They were violet, a shade Jackson had never seen in human eyes, and they focused on him with startling clarity for someone who'd been frozen for 5 years. Then she started screaming. Not in fear, Jackson knew fear, and this wasn't it. This was fury, pure and incandescent, expressed in a language that sounded like music played at the wrong speed. She slammed her palms against the pod's interior viewport, hard enough to make Jackson step back. The translator implant in his ear stuttered, trying to process the rapid-fire syllables, catching fragments. Sold like cargo. Dishonor to... Coward won't even... The pod's door hissed open, and she exploded out of it with the coordination of someone who'd trained for zero-gravity combat. Jackson found himself backed against a storage container, hands raised in surrender, while a furious alien woman who barely came up to his shoulder pointed at him and delivered what was clearly a comprehensive character assassination in a language he didn't speak. Jackson's translator implant finally caught up with her tirade about 3 sentences too late to be useful. The words came through in disjointed fragments, his ear filling with what sounded like creative variations on the theme of his inadequacy as a human being. Spineless merchant filth bought me like navigation charts have more honor than... I'm sorry. Jackson managed to squeeze the words in during what might have been a pause for breath. I didn't know. I just wanted the ship. She stopped mid-gesture, her hand frozen in what his implant unhelpfully translated as a sign of extreme contempt, possibly anatomically impossible. Her violet eyes narrowed, scanning him from head to toe in a way that made him feel like a disappointing purchase she was considering returning. You wanted the ship, she repeated in accented but clear standard, her voice dripping with skepticism. Just the ship? Yes. I saved for 7 years. I'm a moisture farmer, was a moisture farmer. I bid on a cargo vessel, and apparently I got... He gestured helplessly at her, then at the cryopod, then back at her. More than I bargained for? She stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sharp bark of sound that held no humor. You accidentally bought a person. I didn't read the fine print, Jackson admitted, which even to his own ears sounded pathetic. The fine print. She turned away from him, running her hands through her hair in a gesture that seemed universal across species. Her fingers caught on a tangle, and she grimaced, pulling free a strand of silver blue that had clumped with suspension gel. 5 years in that cursed box, and I wake up to a man who bought me by accident because he didn't read the fine print. In my defense, they scrolled it really fast. She whirled back to face him. That's not a defense. That's not even close to a defense. That's what gets you killed in the outer reach. That kind of... She stopped, pressing her fingers to her temples. What's your name? Accidental slaver? Jackson. And I'm not... I don't want to be... This is a mistake. Jackson, she said, testing the name like it might be poisonous. I am Lyria of the Athari, navigator of the quantum paths, daughter of the Songtides, and according to this ship's manifest, she jabbed a finger toward the cryopod screen. I am your property, cargo designation 7733-AE. Do you understand how humiliating that is? I have a reference number. Jackson opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I could probably get them to give you a better number. The look she gave him could have flash-frozen water. That was a joke, he added weakly. A bad one. I make bad jokes when I'm nervous. And I'm very nervous right now because I accidentally bought a person and I don't know how to unbuy a person. Lyria moved past him to the cargo hold's ladder, climbing with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent time in variable gravity. Jackson scrambled after her, emerging onto the main deck to find her already at the navigation console, her fingers dancing across controls she shouldn't have known how to access. Hey, how are you doing that? I'm an Etheri navigator, she said without looking up. We can sense quantum pathways the way your species smells burning food. This console is responding to me because navigation systems recognize what I am. The screen filled with route calculations that made Jackson's eyes water. Your previous owner, my previous owner, was Garrett Voss, trader and gambler, with debts to 17 different syndicates. He won me in a card game from the Helios Mining Consortium, who had me plotting courses through unstable space for 5 years before that. I was taken from my homeworld during a cultural exchange mission, sold to the consortium, then gambled away, then sold again to you. Do you know what the street value of an Ethari navigator is? I really don't want to know, Jackson said honestly. More than you paid for this entire ship. Lyria pulled up the purchase records, and Jackson watched his signature appear on screen, looping and shaky next to the itemized list. You got a bargain. Congratulations. I don't want a bargain. I want... Jackson stopped, trying to organize his thoughts. Look, this is clearly illegal on multiple levels. I'm pretty sure there are human rights conventions about this. Probably Athari rights conventions too. 6 of them, Lyria confirmed, all ratified by the United Colonies. None of them enforced in the Outer Reach, which is where we currently are. She pulled up a star chart, indicating their position well beyond the official jurisdiction lines. Out here, the manifest is what matters, and the manifest says, I belong to you. Jackson collapsed into the pilot's chair, which complained with a wheeze of escaping air from a leak he'd already added to his mental repair list. Lyria remained standing at the navigation console, her posture rigid, her long ears angled back in what he was learning to recognize as either aggression or deep irritation, possibly both. Okay, Jackson said, trying to gather his thoughts into something resembling a plan. Let me think about this logically. Please do, Lyria said. I'll wait here, being cargo. You're not cargo. The manifest disagrees with you. She pulled up the document again, zooming in on the line item. See? Right there between emergency rations and medical supplies. I'm apparently worth less than 40 packets of freeze-dried protein paste. Jackson rubbed his face with both hands. Can you stop making this worse? I'm not making it worse. I'm making it accurate. She moved away from the console, pacing the small bridge with the restless energy of someone who'd been still for far too long. 5 years, Jackson. 5 years in suspension, dreaming the same looped memories because the consortium couldn't afford the processing power for proper dream generation. Do you know what that does to a mind? I really don't. It makes you very good at holding grudges. She stopped pacing, her violet eyes fixing on him with unsettling intensity. But here's the interesting part. You seem genuinely distressed about this situation. Of course I'm distressed. I bought a person. Yes, but most people who buy people don't get distressed about it. That's rather the whole problem with the industry. Lyria tilted her head, studying him like he was a particularly confusing equation. You're either the worst slaver in the Outer Reach, or you're telling the truth about the accident. I'm telling the truth! Jackson gestured frantically at the auction house receipt still displayed on his datapad. Look, I paid 8,000 credits for what I thought was just a ship. If I'd known there was a navigator included, I would have bid higher? Run away screaming! Jackson stood up, needing to move, to do something with the anxious energy coursing through him. I grew algae for 7 years. I calibrated moisture evaporators. The most exciting thing that happened to me was when the irrigation system flooded Sector 7 and I got to use the emergency pump. I don't know how to deal with accidentally acquiring a sentient being. Lyria's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been the precursor to a smile. The emergency pump was exciting. It has 6 different speed settings and a variable pressure valve, Jackson said defensively. Do you know how rare that is in moisture farming equipment? I can honestly say I've never thought about it. Well, it was very exciting. Jackson realized he was talking about pump mechanisms while a woman was pointing out that he technically owned her, and his brain threatened to shut down entirely from the absurdity. This isn't helping. We need a solution. Lyria moved to the viewport, looking out at the space station beyond. Kepler 7 rotated slowly, its docking bays blinking with traffic lights, ships coming and going in the eternal dance of commerce and survival. The solution is simple. You take me back to the auction house, demand a refund, I get sold to someone else. Maybe someone who actually read what they were buying. No, Jackson said immediately. Her ears perked forward, a gesture he couldn't interpret. No? If I take you back, you'll just end up in the same situation. Different owner, same problem. He pulled up the ship's logs again, scrolling through Garrett's sparse records. There has to be another way. There isn't. Lyria's voice was flat. I've been through this enough times to know. The manifest is legally binding. My people's homeworld is beyond the Veil Nebula, 3 months of travel through quantum corridors that most navigators can't even perceive. No commercial route goes there. No enforcement agency has jurisdiction. I'm valuable cargo in the outer reach, and valuable cargo stays cargo until it's no longer valuable. Jackson kept scrolling, refusing to accept it. The log showed route after route, all of them plotted with a precision that standard navigation computers couldn't match. Lyria had taken Garrett through corridors that should have been impossible, shaving weeks off journeys, avoiding patrol zones, finding paths through space that bent around the normal rules. "What if I freed you?" Jackson asked. Lyria turned from the viewport. "Freed me how? We're in the outer reach. There's no bureaucracy to file paperwork with, no judge to declare me emancipated. Then what if we were partners?" The words came out before Jackson had fully thought them through. But once they were out there, they felt right. Business partners. You navigate, I pilot. We split whatever we earn. Lyria stared at him like he'd just suggested they navigate through a black hole, using only optimism and spare parts. Partners. Yes, equal partners. Jackson was gaining momentum now, the idea crystallizing even as he spoke. You need a ship to get home. I need someone who can actually navigate worth a damn. These logs show you can cut routes in half, find corridors I didn't even know existed. We could make real money with that. And what do you gain from making me a partner instead of just using me as the manifest says you can? Jackson met her gaze. The ability to sleep at night without feeling like human garbage? She laughed, and this time, there was something almost genuine in it. You're serious. You're actually serious. I'm extremely serious. Look, I don't know the first thing about quantum navigation. I can plot a basic course from point A to point B if both points are clearly marked and nothing unexpected happens. But you, he gestured at the navigation console where her earlier calculations still glowed. You can do things with this ship that I couldn't do in 100 years of training. Lyria crossed her arms, her long ears angling forward in what he was starting to recognize as consideration. And in exchange for this partnership, you'd help me get home. Yes, we make enough money doing cargo runs, build up a reserve, then plot a course to your homeworld, however long it takes. Jackson pulled up the star charts, zooming out until the Veil Nebula appeared as a distant smudge of purple and gold. 3 months, you said? Through quantum corridors that shift like breathing, through space where normal matter behaves in ways your physics instructors would call impossible, through territories controlled by things that don't negotiate in any language humans speak. She moved closer to the chart, her finger tracing a path that wound through empty spaces between stars. The Athari developed quantum navigation because we had to. Our homeworld sits in a pocket of folded space. You can't reach it by going straight. You have to know how to turn sideways through reality. That sounds complicated. It's extraordinarily complicated. It's also the only reason my people weren't conquered centuries ago. Can't invade a world you can't find. She zoomed in on a cluster of stars near the nebula. These are the outer markers, the last verified navigation points. Beyond them, the quantum foam becomes unstable. Most ships that enter never return. But you could navigate it. I could try. She turned to face him fully. Jackson, do you understand what you're proposing? Months of travel through the most dangerous space in known territory, possibly for nothing. I haven't been home in 5 years. Things change, people move on. For all I know, my family thinks I'm dead. Do you want to go home? The question hung in the recycled air between them. Lyria's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Jackson to name, finally settling on something that looked like pain, wrapped in determination. Yes, she said quietly. More than anything. Then we're partners. Jackson held out his hand, Earth custom but universal enough in meaning. Lyria looked at his hand, then at his face, then back at his hand. You realize I could be lying. I could be planning to steal this ship the moment we make port somewhere civilized. Are you? No, but I could be. But you're not. Jackson kept his hand extended, and I'm choosing to trust that you're not. Because the alternative is treating you like property, and I'm not doing that. She reached out slowly, her fingers wrapping around his hand. Her skin was warm, her grip surprisingly strong. You're either the most honorable person I've met in 5 years, or the most naive. Can't I be both? I suppose you can. She shook his hand once, firmly, then released it. Partners, then, but I have conditions. Of course you do. First, I get my own quarters. The manifest might say I'm cargo, but I'm not sleeping in the cargo hold. Agreed. You can have the first mate's cabin. Second, I control all navigation decisions. If I say a road is too dangerous, we don't take it. That seems reasonable. Third, you teach me to pilot this ship. If something happens to you, I need to be able to fly us out of trouble. Jackson hesitated. You want to learn to pilot? I've spent 5 years being helpless, going where others decided. I'm not doing that anymore. Her violet eyes blazed with determination. I'm learning every system on this ship, starting with propulsion. Fair enough, but I have a condition too. Lyria raised an eyebrow, a gesture made more dramatic by her long ears, tilting quizzically. You're the one who offered partnership. You don't get to add conditions after. Actually, I do, Jackson said, surprising himself with his firmness. My condition is that you stop calling yourself cargo. Not as a joke, not as a reference, not ever. You're Lyria, navigator. That's it. She blinked, her aggressive posture softening slightly. That's your condition? Yes, because every time you say it, even sarcastically, it makes this whole situation feel worse than it already is. Jackson moved to the pilot's chair and began initializing the departure sequence. We're partners now. Partners don't let partners self-deprecate using inventory terminology. That's unexpectedly thoughtful for someone who bought me by accident. Stop. Right, sorry, old habits. Lyria settled into the navigator's seat, her fingers already dancing across the quantum path interface. So, partner, what's our first move? We have 4,000 credits, a ship that needs minor repairs, and absolutely no client base. Jackson pulled up the local job boards, scrolling through postings that ranged from legitimate cargo hauling to offers so obviously criminal they practically had warning klaxons attached. How about we start simple? Standard freight runs, build a reputation, stay legal. Boring but sensible, Lyria highlighted several routes on the navigation display. These 3 are heading rimward. Standard commercial corridors, no quantum shortcuts needed. Payment is mediocre but reliable. Let's take the middle one. Medical supplies to the Tertius colony. Medical supplies to Tertius it is. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, and the navigation computer began plotting a course that would have taken Jackson 3 hours to calculate. She finished in 90 seconds. We can shave 2 days off the standard route if we catch the tidal current near the helix formation. Tidal current? Quantum tide. Space isn't actually empty, Jackson. It's full of currents and eddies, places where reality is thicker or thinner. Most pilots can't sense them, so they waste time fighting against flows they can't perceive. She pulled up a visualization that showed space as a rippling ocean of probability. See here? This current flows rimward at approximately 30% faster than standard velocity. We ride it for 6 hours. We save 48 hours of travel time. Jackson studied the display, seeing nothing but abstract colors and mathematical notations. I'm going to have to take your word for it. You're going to have to take my word for a lot of things if we're doing this. She glanced at him, something almost playful in her expression. That's what partnership means. Trust. Then I trust you. Plot the course. The next 3 weeks dissolved into a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. Lyria taught him the basics of quantum navigation during their jump transits, explaining how the Athari perceive space as a living thing, full of currents and songs that most species couldn't hear. Jackson taught her piloting, watching her initial frustration transform into something like joy as she learned to feel the ship's responses through the control interface. They delivered medical supplies to Tertius, picked up agricultural equipment headed for a terraforming colony, transported a very nervous xenobiologist and her collection of extremely illegal plant samples to a research station that definitely wasn't conducting experiments banned by 7 different scientific ethics boards. The jobs weren't glamorous, but they paid, and more importantly, they worked. Lyria's navigation cut their travel time so dramatically that they started getting repeat clients, then referrals. Word spread through the freight networks about the celestial drift and its impossibly efficient routes. Jackson handled the business side, negotiating rates, and managing logistics. Lyria handled everything that involved not crashing into things or accidentally flying through unstable regions of spacetime. 3 weeks in, they were docked at Frontier Station Osiris, celebrating their first profitable month with something the station's food synthesizer optimistically called coffee. It tasted like burnt wire insulation, but they drank it anyway. "I've been thinking," Lyria said, staring into her cup like it might reveal secrets. "About home." Jackson set down his own cup. "Yeah? The routes we've been running, the credits we've been saving. At this rate, we could afford the journey in about 8 months. Maybe 6 if we take some higher-paying jobs." "That's good news." "It is." She looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting the station's harsh lighting. "But I've also been thinking about what happens after." "After we get you home?" "After you help me get home." She turned her cup in her hands. "You'd have the ship free and clear. No navigator to split profits with. You could hire a standard pilot for basic runs. Keep more of the money." Jackson hadn't thought about it, which surprised him when he realized it. "I guess I could. But what?" Lyria smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "I can hear the but in your voice, Jackson. You're thinking something." He was thinking several things, actually. He was thinking about how empty the ship would feel without someone mocking his piloting skills. He was thinking about how he'd gotten used to hearing her laugh when he made terrible jokes during long jumps through empty space. He was thinking about the way she'd stayed up with him through a critical engine repair, handing him tools and telling him stories about her homeworld's crystal cities that sang in solar winds. "I'm thinking that 8 months is a long time," Jackson said finally. "A lot can happen in 8 months. We might discover we can't stand each other by then." "We might," Lyria agreed, though her smile suggested she didn't believe it. "Or we might discover that this partnership works better than either of us expected." He met her eyes. "And when we get you home, maybe you introduce me to your family. Maybe you show me these crystal cities. And maybe, if you want, we come back out here together. Keep running freight. Keep exploring." "You'd do that? Give up the ship being solely yours?" "Lyria, the ship was never solely mine. Not from the moment I opened that cryopod." Jackson leaned back in his chair, watching the traffic outside the station viewport. Ships arriving and departing in their endless dance. "Besides, I bought a ship to find freedom. Turns out freedom isn't about being alone. It's about choosing who you travel with." She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. "My people have a saying, the quantum path is walked by two, one who sees the way, one who dares to follow. I always thought it was about navigation and piloting. And now? Now I think it's about partnership." She raised her terrible coffee in a toast. "To 8 months of freight runs, questionable decisions, and figuring out how to turn sideways through reality." Jackson clinked his cup against hers. "To accidentally buying the best mistake I've ever made." "You know that's still calling me cargo, right?" "No, that's calling you priceless. There's a difference." Lyria laughed, the sound filling the small station cafe, and Jackson realized that 7 years of saving for a ship had led him exactly where he needed to be. Not to freedom from everything, but to freedom with someone who understood that the best journeys were the ones you didn't plan for. Outside, the stars waited, full of quantum currents and impossible routes. And somewhere beyond the Veil Nebula, a homeworld Jackson had never seen called to the navigator sitting across from him. They had 8 months to get there, and a lifetime of freight runs after that, and neither of them could imagine anything better. The end. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Sci-Fi Pulse. If you